On behalf of Raffles University, we are going to start the session with an invocation of a voice of Prakash Narayan. So let me share the screen.
आज की रचना के लिए एक ऐसी क्रांति की आवश्यकता है जो संपूर्ण भी हो और समग्र भी, तथा समाज के हर एक वर्ग को प्रेरित और प्रभावित करे, साथ ही साथ व्यक्ति के समग्र जीवन को भी आंदोलित करे। व्यक्ति और समाज इन दोनों में सर्वांगीण परिवर्तन लाने की शक्ति इस संपूर्ण क्रांति में होनी चाहिए। विलास शब्द समाज सापेक्ष शब्द है, लेकिन समाज के जन सामान्य के जीवन स्तर की आवश्यकताओं के संदर्भ में इनका अर्थ समझना चाहिए। यही बात अन्य भौतिक वस्तुओं की आवश्यकताओं के संबंध में अपनाई जानी चाहिए, जो सीमित मर्यादाओं में ही हो सकती है। इसका अर्थ यही है कि इन सब के पीछे नैतिकता पर बल होना चाहिए।
जेपी
वातावरण को लें। शहरों के सीमाहीन फैलाव के साथ गांवों को जोड़ने, आदिवासी क्षेत्रों, पहाड़ी प्रदेशों और जंगलों, वनों तथा मैदानी प्रदेशों के सवालों पर पुनः विचार करना होगा।
गांव को शहरों
की विरासत में कुछ चीज़ें बहुत मूल्यवान और महान हैं। उनको हमें रक्षा करनी है और उन्हें मजबूत बनाना है, लेकिन साथ ही हमने उत्तराधिकार में बहुत से अंधविश्वास, गलत मूल्य और अन्यायपूर्ण मानवीय और सामाजिक संबंध भी पाए हैं। जातिवाद इसका एक उदाहरण है। भगवान बुद्ध के समय से और हो सकता है उनसे पहले से भी इस बात की कोशिश की गई है कि ऊंच नीच पर आधारित जाति प्रथा को खत्म किया जाए, लेकिन अभी तक यह प्रथा पूरे देश में फैली हुई है। अब समय आ गया है इस कलंक को मिटा दें और भाईचारे और समानता को अपना आदर्श बनाएं और अपने जीवन में उतारें। इसी तरह शादी, जन्म, मृत्यु से जुड़े हुए भी कुछ और बुरे रिवाज हैं। संपूर्ण क्रांति के द्वारा इन्हें भी खत्म किया जाना चाहिए।
लेकिन जेपी की संपूर्ण क्रांति को लोगों ने गंभीरता से नहीं लिया, जिसका जिक्र करते हुए उन्होंने मुंबई के जसलोक अस्पताल से देश के नाम अपने संदेश में कहा,
जनता के आंदोलन के अंतिम लक्ष्य की परिभाषा मैंने संपूर्ण क्रांति कहकर की थी। संपूर्ण क्रांति की मेरी कल्पना का कुछ लोगों ने मखौल उड़ाया और कुछ ने यह कहकर अवहेलना की कि संपूर्ण क्रांति एक अव्यवहारिक आदमी का सपना है। इसलिए मैं एक बार फिर से संपूर्ण क्रांति के विचार को दोहराता हूं और अपना विश्वास उसमें व्यक्त करता हूं।
Thank you so much for your kind attention. I, Randhir Kumar Gautam, on behalf of Raffles University, SOHSS, a Circle for Creative Co-Learning, Vishwanidhan Center for Asian Blossoming, Puducherry and Chennai. On behalf of all these institutions and organizations, I welcome you to the talk on the very topic, democracy, dissent, and Prakash Narayan. It is a moment of extreme pleasure to welcome the guests who are virtually present here to attend this webinar. Honorable Speaker, former Professor Nawal Kishor Chaudhary, former Principal of Patna College, Patna University, and a student of Prakash Narayan movement. Discussant of today's talk, Professor Savyasaachi sir from Jamia, Millia, Islamia, New Delhi, Dr. J.S. Anand, eminent educationist and chairperson of Azad Foundation, Professor Prasenjit Biswas sir, from Assam, Professor Anand Kumar Giri sir from Madras Institute of Development Studies. Later, Professor Adit Nikam sir will also join from CSDS, and all the respected friends, viewers, both on Facebook, on Zoom, listeners, and all our Savyasaachi family members. Let me give a brief introduction to our honorable speaker, although he does not need any introduction at all. Professor Nawal Kishor sir is a very famous public intellectual and social activist from Bihar, and also noted economist and a senior professor of Patna University. He is also former principal of Patna College. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation. Let me give a brief context of today's talk. As you know, today is a very special day. Today is the birth anniversary of Lok Nayak Prakash Narayan. Lok Nayak Prakash Narayan was born on 11 October 1902 in a lower middle class family in a village Sitab Dara, then in Bihar. Now this village is UP. His thinking was primarily conditioned his experience during a long and active political life. He is a symbol of Satya, Tyag, and Samarpan. MacIver once said, democracy is a form of government that is never completely achieved. Democracy grows into its being. It may take a long time before we say we are democratic in real sense. The struggle of Jayaprakash Narayan laid the foundation for a truly democratic India. Jayaprakash's thoughts, ideas that are extremely relevant today, because Jayaprakash Narayan raises the issue of ethics in politics, emphasizes the importance of adhering to the Gandhian ideal of purity of means. He says politics must not be dominated by the pursuit of power, but by commitment to certain values. As you know, Lok Nayak Jayaprakash was deeply influenced with the aspect of Gandhian understanding of politics and society, its moral or ethical basis, and its insistence on democratic values, its great contribution to revolutionary technology in shape of Satyagraha, and its insistence on decentralization of democracy. Even one of the objectives of Sampurna Kranti, total revolution, was to strengthen democracy by ensuring direct participation by the people in the work of government as much as possible. Building blocks, democracy from below was a hallmark of Jayaprakash politics, for that matter. In addition to that, Jayaprakash Narayan was cherished the idea of being decent. We live in a new India where separation of dissent has become new normal. In this sense, the very foundation of our democracy will be in danger of being totally destroyed. With this context, let us try to understand Jayaprakash Narayan's vision about democracy and dissent. With this brief observation, now I would like to invite Professor Nawal Kishor sir to kindly share his thought on the very topic, democracy, dissent, and Jayaprakash Narayan. Sir, over to you. Sir, kindly unmute yourself. Yes.
Thank you, Randhir Kumar Gautam ji from Raffles University. Professor Savyasaachi ji, former HOD, Sociology, Jamia Millia University. Professor Ananta Kumar Giri ji from Madras Institute of Development Studies. Mr. J.S. Anandji, Sunjit Biswasji from Assam, and hopefully Aditya Nigamji, and all the friends who have joined this program through various social media platforms and friends. I deem it an honor and privilege to be invited by Sri Randhir Kumar Gautam, who is a former student of Patna College, of which I am also an alumnus and a former principal, and take it as an opportunity to say something on a very important subject, which is not only relevant today, I think it's more relevant than ever in the history of India and possibly the world. But at the same time, I congratulate Mr. Gautam for organizing this seminar and not only remembering Jayaprakash, but also raising certain issues relating to theoretical and practical aspects of democracy in India and the rest of the world. I must tell you that my only qualification possibly is being a former student and principal of Patna College, of which Gautam once was a student. I've been student of economics and worked in the department in various capacities before taking over the responsibility of principal of Patna College. And I used to talk on certain subjects in and outside Patna College. And Gautam, as he now says, was probably became a person who could appreciate some of the things which I used to say then. And because of his own leanings and certain ideological orientation, he started studying Prakash Narayan ji and his contributions, and also is planning certain other activities. But I have some privilege so far. JP's total revolution movement is concerned. At the time when this movement was launched in Patna, way back in 1934, I was already teaching in Patna University. And therefore, I saw it happening from relatively close quarters. I had some background of social activism, particularly of social political movements belonging to the left of the center stream. And I used to participate in some of the activities then organized by left and democratic parties. So when JP movement was launched and 18th March was organized, which is a landmark date in the history of JP movement, even though that time I was a teacher in Patna University and not directly involved in political activities of political parties, I went and directly participated in that movement. Later on also I took interest, listened to JP and participated in some forms in activities which were associated with JP movement. But I don't consider it important enough to speak on the subject, particularly democracy and dissent and Prakash Narayan. Nonetheless, as Randhir invited me and I thought that I would be simply participating, I deem, as I told you, a privilege to share some of my thoughts on this subject. But before I do that, I take the occasion to say that Jayaprakash Narayan, like Randhir Gautam, was a student of the great Patna College. Those who have read his biography must have known it. He was a student of Patna College. That time, Patna College used to impart education in different streams. JP was a student of intermediate science. But just before the examination, he attended a lecture, it's a public meeting of Maulana Azad in Patna. And that inspired him to leave Patna College just before the examination. And he joined Bihar Vidyapith, which was launched then by Mahatma Gandhi. And later on, you know, to other places. So it gives me a great pleasure, and I think I deem it a great privilege to say that we all belong to that great institution. Now, coming to the subject proper, I consider democracy to be the greatest invention of political societies. What is democracy? How it works, how it is beneficial, and possibly how it creates problems. And when I say this, I go back to Plato. I have never been a formal student of political science, I must tell you, but I'm known as political analyst also in circles here, because I have taken some interest in some studies and activities which are related to politics. So issues, certain issues which may bother a certain section of society. But I do consider that when Aristotle said man is a political animal, so it's a political being, he had some important message to convey. And I do consider that democracy is the greatest invention of political societies and political philosophers. And I also believe, and I have conviction, that great conviction, that democracy is the only way to organize a just society, a society which liberates humankind from many kinds of bondages from which it still suffers. So I have a great belief and an ardent believer in democratic societies. I would like to add, I consider democracy as indivisible. And when we generally talk of democracy, we talk of political democracy. But I believe that democracy should be viewed as a total concept. A concept which is indivisible. any political democracy, even in the best form and in the best content, is inadequate if it is not extended to economic democracy and further to social democracy. As I told you, I am not an authority on JP, but I have the feeling that when JP, Prakash Narayan ji, talked of total revolution, he must have something of the kind in his mind. Why total revolution? He must have probably felt that any democracy, political democracy of political democracy nature, is less than complete. It's not going to be realized in full unless democracy is extended to other spheres of life, importantly to economic life and social life. And it has to be viewed in that context. Today, it is more than important, more important than ever before, when we pay tributes to the great democrat, a great socialist, and a great humanist and liberator of society from injustice and many kinds of practices which he considered are against achieving a just society, to mention all these thoughts. After having said that, I would like to concentrate on political democracy. As I told you earlier, democracy is something which is not new to India and certainly to Bihar. It is generally agreed and said, you can have two opinions of that Bihar had an experiment of democracy during Buddha's time. Vaishali. It's a different thing that it is mentioned once a while and not much research has been done on Vaishali, which is still confined to some few pages of history. It still remains an unfinished archaeological site, and I think much more research is to be done on Vaishali Republic. But then, in recorded history, we know how Athenian democracy was conceived and practiced. Democratic Party and oligarchic party. How they quarreled, how Socrates patronized oligarchic party, and how and why he was made to die. So it's not that democracy has not had critics in the past. But as I have already mentioned, I'm one of those taking a holistic view. Democracy is the best option available for mankind to establish and run a just society. A society which gives an opportunity of man to reach its full potential, realize its full potential. Now, what is this democracy? It's a textbook knowledge. And one may have different opinions about that. But by and large, it captures the spirit. It's a system, society, political society, which is of the people, for the people, and by the people. But when we say of the people, we have to be very careful. In a class-ridden society, people are not a homogeneous quantity or homogeneous group. And nobody understood it better than Marx at one time, and many others earlier, and in modern times, Prakash Narayan. Which people? And that's the reason why, probably, he took to Marxism and later on revised his thoughts, realizing its limitations from the point of view of true democracy, political democracy, perhaps possibly, and most probably, he took to democratic socialism and espoused the cause of democracy. But he did initially start as a Marxist. He did understand that a class society, people, even though theoretically elect a government, but then some people get more voice in de facto sense than some other people who are relatively privileged. So of the people. But having known all this, he believed that under the circumstances, in the present circumstances, which are defined by class society, Lok Shakti, people's power, should be awakened and invoked. And this people's power, Lok Shakti, can give us a kind of democracy which works and which takes us to levels and to a distance which is nearer to realization of full democracy, which may be an utopian ideal, but is still achievable. So, Lok Shakti he invoked. When he talks of this, he must have had Mahatma Gandhi in the background. Mahatma Gandhi, who was a leader of International Non-Congress, but freedom movement, particularly after 1921, was an ideal in this respect. At that point of time in history, Mahatma Gandhi invoked people's power, Lok Shakti, even though he might not have used such a word. It was people's power which was invoked. People were awakened. And that was the most significant development so far democratization of society is concerned. So Lok Shakti. When he talked of ethics and politics, Gandhi was definitely in the background. I'm not saying that JP was an imitator only, and he had nothing new to contribute. But certainly, we have to accept man's ideas, even a great man's ideas, are product of times, minds, and minds are product of times. And Prakash Narayan was a product of Gandhian times, freedom movement. He left Patna College, as I told you, Randhir and both the students of Patna College. This was at the call of Gandhi and certain other political leaders. Maulana Azad's lecture inspired him to be Patna College and joined Vidyapith. So when we talk about ethics, ethical values, and here both Gandhi and Prakash Narayan were making departures from the earlier prevalent form of democracy, which assumes that man is a Machiavellian political animal. I need not tell Professor Savyasaachi or Giri or many others who have joined this program when Machiavelli was born and what he did. Machiavelli was born exactly 400 years before Mahatma Gandhi was born, in 1469. And his work, Defense, came in the early part of 16th century, which assumed that man is a political beast, political animal, who is guided by motives which have nothing to do with ethics, ethical standards and values. Anything is right in politics, in grabbing power. And even today, Randhir or many others may do good, may serve a purpose if they organize seminars or webinars which discuss the relevance of Machiavellian concept of a state and politics and his assumption, hypothesis of political animal, which is the basis of political societies. As we see today, and as we saw during JP's time also, what was happening in politics was very close to what Machiavelli talks in Prince. Howsoever important and a great leader Mrs. Indira Gandhi was, the person against whom Prakash Narayan stood and raised voice was practicing some kind of a politics which was very close to Machiavellian ideals. Even today, what is happening in India and elsewhere probably bears testimony to what Machiavelli said. When I say this, I don't mean that this should be the case. Gandhi said definitely no. Jayaprakash, a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, said no, emphatic no. Politics cannot be devoid of ethics. Personal ethics as well as social ethics. And any politics which is devoid of personal and social ethics leads to situations where you need Mahatma Gandhi to fight against the British imperialism, and later Prakash Narayan in his most creative an assertive way against Indira Gandhi. So we know the answers. Even today there are people who say this and try to follow this. Now, so when we remember Prakash Narayan, we must bear this in mind. He was not only an ardent supporter or advocate of democracy, but he was a theorist for excellence, of giving us the concept of total democracy. I'm not using total revolution, total democracy, indivisible democracy, which alone can guarantee total revolution, which alone can create conditions in which man, in the wider sense of the term, not in the general sense, can realize his or her full potential. So this is the new thing, which was the Gandhian spirit and JP's spirit, ethical standards. But then, all the same, it had a political message. But then this democracy, which is a assertion of power, exercise of power, along with ethical standards, power is not in a brute sense of the term, in the Machiavellian sense of the term. Power, political power. People have to come in. People have to rise. You remember, JP used to quote Dinkar, कि सिंहासन खाली करो कि जनता आती है. Dinkar's line. People are coming. Vacate the throne. People are coming. This is the assumption. But as I told you, this is not in pursuit of power in the Machiavellian sense of the term. A power which is only a means to achieve an ethical goal, that is to establish a political and finally a larger society which is based on justice, human dignity, and human rights. This is, but how do we achieve it? Because Machiavellian political animal is not dead in us. It surfaces time and time again and showed its ugliest face. It showed its most ugliest face in Hitler, who butchered certain communities and societies and posed a threat to the world, finally defeated. And as you know, Gandhi took the sides of those who opposed Hitler. So, brutal form. It showed its ugliest face in the form of British colonialism and imperialism. And certain acts like Jallianwala Bagh, which is often quoted today. Ugliest face. So, Machiavellian political beast is not dead. And I would dare to say, it took some say in Mrs. Indira Gandhi also, who imposed emergency on this country, against which JP rose and rose like a lion, not in the ordinary sense of roaring. He had the most polite, but yet most effective and assertive way of saying. I had the privilege of listening to him when he used to deliver speeches in Gandhi Maidan. When I say he rose, not in the literal sense of the term, that was a political beast, Machiavellian political beast. Indira Gandhi has destroyed virtue. Institutions in polity and judiciary especially, which stuck at the very foundations of democratic society, and is a life based on that. JP, who had very close relations with Nehru's, could not bear this. Initially, he started the movement prior to emergency. But when emergency was imposed, and he was imprisoned and beaten near income tax roundabout in Patna, around which I now live, after my retirement from Patna College, you still have this statue, bandaged head, which will remind you that Prakash Narayan bore the brunt of the lathis when he was leading a march. So that was a political beast, Machiavellian political beast, against which he rose. And he believed, said, and acted upon that this could be resisted. It is possible to resist. It should be resisted, can be resisted, should be resisted, and he did resist it. And he bore the consequences of imprisonment and the lathis and all that. But then that gave us a moral power, ethical resolve to rise and fight against any form of dictatorship, political dictatorship. And this was only possible when dissent is possible. When it is possible to differ with views expressed by others. We remember Voltaire, what he said, that I grant you the right to differ, but I shall fight till the last drop of my blood to say that. You may differ with me, but I still grant you that right. Now, this is the essence. No democracy is possible anywhere in thought or practice, in political life, social life, religious life, cultural life, any life, without allowing and respecting different views, differing views. Dissent, it is most important in political life. But it is not confined to political life. It is important in social life, in family life, in community life, economic life. Decentralization means what? Different issues. Social, cultural life, religious life, any monopolization, anywhere, whether it's in politics, or economy, or society, is injurious to this. Media is the most important form where we have this dissent. Expressing this dissent through media, through academia, through media, through public meetings, social activities, religious gatherings, cultural gatherings, all are important. Unless we allow this, not only accept this, but also respect dissent. It's not enough to accept by way of compulsion that there is a provision in Indian Constitution now of free expression, which is not fully realized, and you know that there are often attacks on that. It is also important to respect this dissent. Unless we respect this right to differ anywhere and everywhere, thought, expression, whether it's the like universities, society, cultures, religion, everywhere. We do not create conditions where democracy can truly work. Democracy just got election every 5 years. Even Hitler was elected democratically. What happened? Indira Gandhi was elected democratically. Even emergency was imposed through, with the help of a provision of Indian Constitution. But what was the result? What was the intent? What was the outcome? Even the removal of judges, Supreme Court judges supersession, which resulted into resignation of cinema judges, was done legally. But it was it in the spirit of democracy? Was it in the spirit of constitutionalism, in the best sense of the term? Now this was all aimed at monopolization of political power. Naturally, this is important. And nobody articulated best in post-independent society and acted upon, bearing the cost of that in terms of lathis, blow of lathis and imprisonment, finally leading to his death at a later stage. Was JP? No better person. Prakash Narayan Ji has to come in a natural way in post-independent society. He became the symbol of democratic dissent. He became not only a symbol of revolution, political revolution, he became a symbol of democratic dissent and democracy. Finally, so today, when his date of birth falls, we must remember him for these contributions. Of course, we have to bear in mind that he had not a partial view of democracy. That's why he talked of total revolution, but that's a separate question. If I go to total revolution, I talk of social revolution, Janutore, etc., and social distinction, caste, scientific temper. That's going to take you in other areas. But it is not out of place to mention it, that he had a view of democracy which was also total, which was not confined to political democracy only. Even though the focus was on political democracy, electoral politics, dissolve the assembly, this was the call. Dissolve. Now, this is in this context. But I would like to finish this initial remarks on which you will have very eminent commentators, and I have already told you that I have a great limitation. I have never studied political science as such, except that I did some civics in a school at intermediate. So I'm not the right person. I'm not a political theorist. But I have seen JP from close quarters, and I've taken an interest in political life. And in my humble ways, I march in the streets of Patna whenever there is threat to democratic life and democratic society, whether it's in university or outside. But as I said, that it would not be complete if I don't make some passing comments and references to what is happening today. It is not enough to remember a great man like Prakash Narayan on his birthday. It is not enough to pay tributes to this great theorist and practitioner of democracy and democratic dissent and just society in its various forms, in polity, economy, society, culture, values. It's not enough to pay tribute to a man who combined, like Gandhi, politics and ethics, and espoused the goal of a society or a man which is not only a Machiavellian animal, but a Gandhian human being. It's not enough. It is also necessary, as I said, to say what is happening. It is not enough. It's a different thing that history is important. Those who do not read history are more likely to repeat it. There are debates these days. Some people say, forget history. I'm not one of those. Even the worst crimes of history should be remembered. We have become so selective today that some inconvenient truths of relating to history which go against our immediate political interests or vested interests. We say, no, forget history, forget. Some people selectively remember those events because they further their cause. But I am one of those that history, to the extent possible, should be remembered as it stood then and as it is understood then and understood today. Otherwise, how could we remember Hitler, a man so hated in history? We do remember Hitler, remember not in the best sense of the term. How can we forget Hitler? And so how can we forget Indira Gandhi? How can we forget emergency? A great historian, of course, a leftist historian once said, well-known historian, I did not name him, that, and I agree with him, history is the memory of society. A society without history, knowing history, is like a man without memory. So it should be remembered. But this is not enough. We have to examine the relevance of historical figures. Even today, there is need to remember Socrates, who was not a Democrat. You know better, many of you, than I do. But a man who gladly took poison to end his life at the diktat of Athenian assembly, which is governed by Democratic Party. He died at the altar of truth, freedom of speech. Not that I endorse his views about democracy, but he died. We still remember Plato. 24 years later, Socrates, roughly 25 years later. Why do we remember? Initially, Randhir talked of Gautam, Mahatma, Buddha. We remember him. So, we remember, but it is not enough. We have to discuss their relevance. And we can't discuss their contemporary relevance unless we discuss contemporary societies. We don't have time in this seminar, and probably that is not the intention. Or even if this is intention, I think I can't do justice because this webinar has a limited time period. But I'll take a couple of minutes and then finish so that commentators have time and other participants. What is happening in India? What is happening in India? India is moving fast against the great ideals of Mahatma Gandhi and Prakash Narayan. I won't dwell on these issues in detail, but it's moving fast towards a monopolized society economy, which is against the ideals of decentralized economy of Mahatma Gandhi and Prakash Narayan. It's against JP's concept of democratic and socialist economy and society. He might not have continued to be a Marxist, but JP was a socialist par excellence. What kind of socialism we are practicing today? And this is not one party that it is doing. Indiraji, whatever she might have done through emergency and political dictatorship, she had some orientation towards a democratic society like her father. But what happened in 82? International Monetary Fund, conditionality is 81. Liberalization, privatization, globalization is found in the conditions which IMF imposed in India during Indira's time in 82. What did Rajiv Gandhi did? What Manmohan Singh did? Liberalization, privatization, globalization. What kind of democracy it is? And further continued by Atal Bihari Vajpayee and now Narendra Modi. Even the socialist leaders, our great socialist leaders, some of whom must have worked with Prakash Narayan, and they did work, are practicing capitalism in its best form. If not best form, but I should say worst form. I shouldn't say best form. Best form of capitalism is truly competitive capitalism, which never happens. Worst form of capitalism. What Lalu Ji Rabri regime did, what Nitish is doing in Bihar, since I'm located in Bihar, what are they doing? Forget those national leaders, Manmohan Singh and others, Congress, and then Manmohan Singh under etc. under Congress regime, and further down Atalji and Narendra Modi. What are they doing in economy? Secondly, politics. What is happening? Democratic dissent is not only carved, it is sought to be killed. What happened to the media? What happened to the media? During JP movement, one Giri commission was constituted because media was capped during emergency. What happened? 77, when JP installed Janata Party government under Morarji Desai, what did they do with the press freedom? They talked of All India Radio, to organize All India Radio in the BBC Corporation time. What happened? Prasar Bharati. What is this Prasar Bharati? And private media monopolized by powerful media magnates. What is happening? We are lamenting day in, day out. All forms of the state power are moving further and further from democratic ideals. Now it is the best time to remember a man like Prakash Narayan, who fought against all forms of authoritarianism. In politics, uppermost, most important politics, but in the economy, family, society, culture, and everywhere, it's a time now to not only revisit, but revive the spirit of JP and tell these rulers, Singhasan Khali Karo ki Janata aati hai. Assertion of people's power. For what? For democracy. And democracy is meaningless without content, without decent and a just society. With these words, as I have already expressed my limitations, I would like to close my remarks. I'm open to comments, criticisms, and
Thank you so much.
all that which follows an initial presentation. Thank you, Randhir. I'm very, very happy. I congratulate you. I'm a proud teacher of yours. I'm a proud teacher. You have continued that spirit. I'm really proud of your achievement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for an inspiring talk and very motivating talk. And you are always be the source of my inspiration and all the creative thinkers of Patna University. We are also trying to make some more library in the villages in rural part of Bihar, and we are planning to execute that plan also. Okay, so thank you so much, sir. Now I'm also joined by Saji Varghese. Welcome, sir. So it's time to have a kind of discussion. So first, I would like to invite Professor Savyasaachi, sir, who is also my source of inspiration. Sir, over to you to kindly give a comment.
Thank you very much, Randhir, and I'm very happy that we had an opportunity to listen to Professor Nawal Kishor Chaudhary, who was witness to a large part of what happened during the JP movement. And also, congratulations to you, Randhir, that you took the initiative to start a discussion on Prakash Narayan, his ideas, his works, and his thoughts. It's a good beginning because when we want to know more about Prakash Narayan and his movement, there is very little literature that is available to people at large and to academics. I feel that the importance of Prakash Narayan's movement has been not taken into account in all the discussions on subaltern studies and all the discussions on decolonization that are going underway in contemporary academic circles and outside. So this is a very good beginning, and we hope to hear more of this. And it's important that we continue to work on Prakash Narayan movement and his ideas. And I think Professor Nawal Kishor's talk is a very important contribution in that direction. I have some questions for Professor Nawal Kishor by way of clarification. And then I have my own reflections on the JP movement. You see, in 1974, when the movement started, I was just a young student who had joined his graduation in Hindu College, Delhi University. I had just passed out from school, and I was introduced to JP movement as I entered college. My memories of Prakash Narayan movement are very, very live in my head, and some of the questions that were asked then and continue to be important today, I would like to raise for Professor Nawal Kishor to tell us more about. First is that we didn't get to hear very much from him on the idea of dissent. Today we need a little more discussion on what dissent means. Dissent has been misunderstood to go for anything and everything that a person feels free to comment on and say whether for or against authority or not. What we learned from the JP movement is that dissent has an ethical base. Dissent is a deep reflection on the conditions in which we exist, a deep reflection on who we are in relationship to those conditions, and a deep concern for continuing dialogue under all circumstances. And I think there are three important ideals that JP movement held high. And I think its contribution to understanding dissent in a much deeper and a much more contributory way to understanding what democracy is very, very important. What I remember of the discussions in those days was that JP movement had initiated a discussion on the importance of non-party political processes in the making of polity. While it was being argued that political systems, the three arms of democracy, are very important, but the strength of these three arms, the efficacy of these three arms is dependent on the sturdiness and the robustness of non-party democratic processes. And when you talk of non-party political processes, they actually mean processes that enrich civil society. And when we talk of civil society, we specifically mean the freedom for association, the freedom from continuing dialogue, and the freedom to express their views with a sense of responsibility. What we see when the non-party political processes become weak, or when they are attacked by the large-scale political system that we have, I think the crisis for democracy much deepened. So the possibility of a political democracy around the institution of the state is possible only when non-party political systems are robust and active. I think that was one of the messages that I got from the J2 movement. And continuing with that, I think CSDS started the Lokayan project in order to enhance and enrich those processes, and a lot of it came out from there. And I don't think this is the time for discussing that. The second important thing is an anecdote which I want to share with you from Vaishali, the city of Vaishali, which Nawal Kishor mentioned. I was given the task of studying a public library in Vaishali, Lalganj. The library is called Sharda Sadan Pustakalaya, and it was run by a small citizen of this place who met Gandhiji, fortunately or unfortunately, when Gandhiji walked through Bihar and asked Gandhiji what he should do. And Gandhiji told him, start a library. And he started a library. And by the time I reached there, the library was closed. And my task was to find out how the library can be revived. And what I discovered was that in that library, there were 1.5 lakh books, several of them in Braille. There were 11 to 12 departments that were being run, and the library had at one point in time an extension service to the hinterland with the library at the center. So there were young boys and girls who were taking books to villages on bicycles, taking a note of who's reading the book and what is the performance of reading. And I asked this man, what is your understanding of Prakash Narayan? And he said, this library shows you my understanding of what Prakash Narayan meant by total revolution. And the message that he gave me was that unless and until the idea of literacy is taken out of the hands of the formal education system, unless we redefine literacy to be more than just what the formal education system demands of us, until then, the whole idea of Sampurna Kranti is not going to be possible. And what he told me was that total, he knew a little bit of English also, and he said the word total is perhaps a misnomer for describing Sampurna Kranti. Right? And he referred to me the word of Samagrata as what total revolution actually means. Samagrata means comprehensiveness, comprehensive transformation of not only the structures of society, but also of the individual. In other words, if you transform the structures of society without preparing the individual to be available to those structures or work those structures, any kind of transformation is going to be meaningless. My last point, I don't think I have too much time. So my last point to Nawal Kishor is that the political systems will do what they have to do because the compulsions of designing policies is what it is. I would like him to throw some light on the political and economic conditions in 1974, which led to this. For instance, my memory goes to say that the Jayaprakash's movement was essentially a students' movement. Right? Students were in the frontier of this movement. Students had given a call to walk out of the universities because the universities were not delivering what they had to deliver. It was the students who were suffering because of a lot of political economic conditions that were prevailing there. So I would appreciate if you could give us a glimpse of this aspect of the movement that was happening there, and also give us some idea of why the students, not because only their future is at stake, but I think students, because students are the backbone of any civil society. Studentship is the background of any civil society. Students is a mobile population. They go out of the university, they become adults and become part of society. What they leave behind is actually a certain mode of studentship. The whole idea of learning and unlearning. I think Prakash Narayan was trying to emphasize also that studentship ought to be privileged in any kind of a polity, without which it will not be possible for us to understand how social transformation can happen to benefit everybody in the society. With these few words, I hand over to
Thank you.
Randhir Gautam.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And your comment is very, very deep and so relevant. I would request Professor Nawal Kishor sir to kindly note down these questions. Now, I would like to invite Professor Anand Kumar Giri sir to kindly share his comments as a discussion. Sir, over to you.
Sir, thank you, Randhir. Thank you, Professor Chaudhary and Professor Savyasaachi. I would like to share a PPT quickly. So may I share this screen, please?
Yes, sure, sir, you can.
Giri, little louder. We can't hear you properly. If you come closer to the mic, it will be helpful.
So, dear friend, to this conversation, just 1 minute. So first of all, my tribute to Prakash Narayan, the immortal spirit, and Professor Chaudhary and Professor Savyasaachi. To this conversation, I wish to bring the theme of democracy, dissent, and alternative planetary futures, with a specific reflection on Prakash Narayan and the kind of interlinked question that Professor Savyasaachi raised. Now, we need to bring these questions to contemporary challenges, and it is in that spirit I wanted to suggest how the neoliberal political economy and the kind of challenge it poses to democracy, as Foucault would say, now it shifts from homo economicus to entrepreneur. And Wendy Brown, a thoughtful
I think, unfortunately, we lost the internet connection of Professor Anantagiri sir. We are okay. So he is taking some time. So meanwhile, Professor Nawal Kishor sir, you can kindly reply.
I hope Professor Savyasaachi is there. He's there.
Yes, he is there.
So I thank him for making very valuable comments on my presentation.
And it is in this context, how do we cultivate parts of democracy? I have also sent you my PPT because my internet is not stable. If possible, you can show.
Yes.
I want to go in this temporary challenges to democracy from our contemporary political and economic formation. And it is in that context, how do we build on the wider democratic challenge nurtured by Prakash Narayan, but also Gandhi and Maratha. And here, democracy, how do we think about democracy in linking to economics, politics?
Professor Giri, I think there is disruption in internet from your side. Okay. Professor Giri, am I audible to you?
So I will skip this screen. I will stop this screen because it is Randhir, you can stop this screen sharing from me because it is creating some problem.
Okay.
I'm very quick.
Please.
Suggest that the challenge of democracy must be related not only to economics and politics, but also to nature and divine. And I wonder whether in the legacy of the JP movement, that idea of the total revolution, of course, it came at a particular point, but that notion of Samagra Kranti today, we must relate it in relationship to nature and divine. And it is in that context, the whole pathway of democracy, the cultivation of democracy as a multidimensional way of living as well as organization must include dialogue with nature and divine, and therefore the ecological self and the transcendental self, in a very open sense, must interact with the political, economic, and social self. And democracy, therefore, involves both democracy of art democracy, as friends like Bandana Sudha has talked about, and democracy also today must be able to listen to not only the unheard voices of minority and the marginalized, but also unheard voices of many beings in nature, many species of nature. Coming to dissent, let us say, dissent also is part of an ascent. As Savyasaachi, Professor Savyasaachi was referring to, dissent is not just opposition or antagonism. Therefore, the very practice of dissent must be accompanied by ascent. What do we really moving towards, which may not be a kind of an a priori plan, an a priori totalizing plan. I want to suggest that dissent, as it is accompanied by hermeneutics of suspicion, in the sense of Paul Ricoeur, is accompanied by not only hermeneutics of recovery, but reconstitution and transformation. Let us put the idea of dissent to two other words: dissent as in the spirit of coming down, and ascent as coming up. Sri Aurobindo talks about dissent and ascent as parts of evolutionary spirit and striving. We also need to link dissenting to way of descending. The dissenters must come down to people, and we know many dissenters also remain at an elite level. One of the difficulty of dissent is that it has become a too closed elite discourse of society. So that descending with people and then ascending, and that descent and ascent also must be accompanied by dissent as a way of gathering people together. It is not just antagonism, though it is a part of it. Therefore, confrontation and compassion comes together. Therefore, cultures of dissent. Now, how do we create society with cultures of dissent? And therefore, law, ethics, politics, morality, as well as constitution is very important. When all these organs are destroyed, therefore, whatever dissenting spirit we have, it is very difficult to build cultures of dissent. Therefore, we must try to create, preserve necessary, but create. And finally, the whole cultures of dissent is not isolated from what we can call as a new art of martyrdom. Now, this martyrdom is to be able to sacrifice ourselves. And it should not be always kind of heroic sense of sacrifice, little act of sacrifice, in the sense that, we might not be chosen by the government or the academic committee or things like this. The courage to stand up. Our teacher and friend Professor J.P.S. Kumar talks about the significance of martyrdom, and he brings some Gandhi and the Islamic traditions as well as the Sikh tradition. Today, we would have to bring that to our martyrdom as an everyday practice. And here we can bring the Gandhian notion of dissent. In fact, I heard one very thoughtful political commentator say that Giri was not there to really confront and to say no. All of us we have born emasculated. But we know today what is happening. Let us reflect on the legacy of the Jeffrey movement. All the foot soldiers of the Jeffrey movement, Lalu Prasad Yadav, Mulayam Singh Yadav, with due respect, what is the legacy of the Jeffrey movement? And it is therefore that when we embrace Jeffrey today, we must ask these kind of questions, and how can we work and meditate in the context of transformation of the very idea of revolution. For example, total revolution, samagra, meaning integral. I have been a student of Swadhyaya movement in Western India, which talks about Pancharanga Kranti, fivefold revolution. And finally, I wanted to present a poem, and my PPT is paraphrasing a few lines from that poem. State, economic, and political, but what about spirit? State and spirit, dancing in an open way with Marx, and Sri Aurobindo. Their state becomes a non-state. Their self becomes a whole-self. Democracy as a dance of co-emptying. My final submission is that democracy and dissent is related not only to assertion of self, but practices of emptying ourselves. And that emptying, both political emptying of the cult of aggression, but also our own emptying, which requires both inner transformation as well as relational, social, and political transformation. I just wanted to offer these thoughts as my humble offering to this dialogue about democracy and dissent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for putting so many philosophical insight into the very discussion on the very topic. So I request respected participant to kindly show in the chat box if you have any comments. Professor Pramod Kumar Shukla, sir, would you like to share your thought? Okay. Meanwhile, I can ask Professor Nawal Kishor, sir, kindly answer those concerns or the queries.
Randhir, as I initially started responding to Professor Savyasaachi's comments, I said then that Professor Savyasaachi made valuable contributions by way of his comments on my presentation, initial presentation. I thank him for that. And to be precise, I pick up the points which he mentioned and expected my response. First is, he has rightly said that JP also floated a concept of partyless democracy. And that was discussed at that time, partyless democracy. Because party system has its limitations. And those limitations are apparent more than ever before now. So far as civil society and other structures which give real meaning to democratic functioning of society are concerned, I totally endorse his views. I am of the view that all power, particularly political power, belong to the people. Low, at the ground, and power should ascend, rather power should descend from above. The present position is, because of historical reasons and many other reasons, social political reasons, power is supposed to be legitimately belonging to the top. And there is a devolution of power from above. This militates against the very spirit of democracy. I believe, for one, that this power should belong to the people on the at the grassroots level. Probably Gandhi was saying the same thing when he talked of many institutions which give expression to this power. JP was also talking. And when you accept this, then the role of civil societies and non-governmental institutions come to play its role. Today what happens is, in the name of democracy, we have legitimately, through legal means, constitutional and other legal means, assigned and now accept that all power belongs to the top. And by way of their favor and some democratic pressure, this power descends to the down level. So when Panchayati system was introduced during Rajiv Gandhi's time, it was taken to be a great revolution. Why? Because prior to that, power was assumed to be legitimately belonging to the upper institutions of political system. So unless we have a thriving, I have a functioning system where non-governmental institutions, whether it's a civil society, some other political institutions, work at the grassroots level, we do not achieve the real goals of democracy. And the spirit in which he made those comments are not only welcome, I fully endorse that. So far Vaishali is concerned, this library, Sharda Library, Savyasaachi may be knowing, I'm a little elder to him probably, because he was, JP movement launched, he was still a student, I was a teacher already, so little younger to me. But I remember in the early 50s, in my village, in North Bihar, libraries were functioning in some form, and they were seemed to be places which were used not only for spreading literacy, but also political awareness. This was largely an outcome of our national movement. In some parts of the country, library movement was very powerful. For instance, Kerala, and they reaped rich dividends from that. Unfortunately, what happened is this, that after independence, some such activities were taken over by the state and they were sought to be run by the state support. Now, while it was considered then to be a good move supporting these initiatives, but the net result is, once a state comes to play its part, private initiative, citizens' initiative was lost. And this is seen in many villages. You don't have public libraries, functioning libraries, which are supposed to perform multiple functions, because they were places where literacy, and not in the ordinary sense of the term, the 3 R's, but the wider sense of education could be carried out, including development of individual, or the place where you can develop an individual, as Plato once said. Human being, developing. Those were the institutions. I don't know the present condition of the Sharda Library in Lalganj, but now I would find time to visit it and see what is happening to that. But then I not only appreciate this point, but I also endorse this point. The third point was political economy, rightly said. Actually, I was not talking so much of JP movement when it was initially, what was the content. I was trying to give a broad framework, a broad outline of the topic. And so naturally, I missed some of the nuances and some of the real contents of that movement. And it is good that Professor Savyasaachi mentioned that. 1974, when JP movement was launched in Bihar, it came from Gujarat, as we know historically. Initially, it was started in Gujarat, probably Neemrana and so on, movement. But when it came to Bihar, it had a background. Professor Savyasaachi must be knowing that in 1967, when he was still younger, there was a movement in Patna. And this movement was against Congress government, KB Sahib government. And this movement was largely politically focused movement, in which students had to play a very important role. Yes, there was a first movement in 1955, firing, which also had a political overtones, but I want to go to that, where Sayyid Sahabuddin was student leader, Professor Mushkundue was there. That was, and probably that was, after independence, that was probably the first student movement which forced Jawaharlal Nehru to come to Patna. But that was limited, but it had a political overtones, which led to the defeat of Mahesh Prasad Singh in Muzaffarpur. Maya Singh emerged. But then the 67 movement was bigger, wider, and wider students' participation. I participated in that. There was two firing on students. And what was the call? Dissolve the assembly. You will find an echo of this in JP movement as well. But there were other issues in 67 movement. Improvement of the students' condition, and most important of all was corruption, eradication of corruption. Corruption came in a big issue, and political aspects were also not absent. And in this background, 74 movement started. What were the political economic conditions? They were common to the country as a whole. And what were the demands? Price rise, 14% increase in inflation rate later during that period, or more than 10% inflation, curb inflation, improve students' conditions, शिक्षा में आमूल परिवर्तन, total transformation of education, आमूल परिवर्तन. And corruption was a big issue. Then democracy was not the main issue, because by that time the emergency was not imposed. So these were political economic demands. Inflation, curb inflation, eradicate corruption from the system, and transform education system, which enables post-success of scientific to ensure quality education, transform education, Amul Parivartan. These were the initial debates. And there were debates in the colleges and universities. I was an active participant. I then, later on, I used to say that even though I support this and I participated in some of these activities, I said that dissent should not be simply opposing, as Professor Giri also said, and I'm sorry, I didn't listen to him, and I'm not able to know what he wanted to say, even though one or two points. But a dissent, an alternative favor was to be provided. An alternative scheme has to be provided. Dissent is just not opposition for opposition's sake. So, and JP was conscious of it. JP did not oppose for opposition's sake. He gave an alternative, and total revolution was the response, which you call comprehension, samagrata, as Savyasaachi ji very well said, in the context of his discussions with some of the local people in Prashal, samagrata. But samagrata, by and large, is overhauling of all aspects of economic, social, political life, society as a whole. New mode of thinking even. Development of a new individual human being. Because society is based on that. Now, those who have done anthropology has probably was referring to some philosophers. This has been a subject with which our philosophers from ancient times down to the modern times have been grappling with these intellectuals. Human being. What kind of a human being? Plato was talking of that. Machiavelli was talking of human being. In later period, Hobbes talks of it, Locke talks of it, Hume talks of it, because it's the foundation. So development of a man, because that's the basis of any society. But social system in all its aspects, economy, society and polity, for brevity and to understand in some kind of articulation, but that doesn't exhaust all social structures. So naturally, this is to be understood. If democracy has to be a meaningful democracy, if dissent has to be a creative dissent, constructive dissent, Gandhi also dissented. But he had this aspect in his mind. JP was a follower of Gandhi also. So JP had it in his mind. Now, criticism not for its own sake, dissent not its opposition for not sake, providing an alternative system and a comprehensive system like that. Not a one isolated system which doesn't work in reality. Assembly and parliament dissolving. But finally, the tragedy is he ended with old system. What he did, he set up a government, anti-Congress government, and that's all. Unfortunately, he didn't get time. And probably he lost that power also to influence the government which he had set up. He was in Delhi, putting Moraji Desai in place and not given up. Who could have been a better choice? Probably many people believe that. Because he was he could be democratic orientation. It came from a social deprived section, dull section, and probably a good administrator. But it was not to come. JP had to install Moraji Desai. We had views which could be as far as anybody's from total revolution. And see the result. So ultimately he had to end up, but that doesn't mean that Prakash is not relevant. French Revolution, many of the ideals were never realized. Russian Revolution not realized. Chinese Revolution, that doesn't mean that these revolutions were not important. So JP movement and JP's contributions, in spite of the fact that JP could not translate it to action and operational thought, and his followers like Laluji ended up with family dynasty. Is this the concept of JP? And it is the ended with an authoritarian rule. And some of his Johnson followers are running the government. Now, so, but then that doesn't mean JP has message lost. JP's contributions have no relevance. He had a role. He created an utopia. He worked for that utopia. He achieved something. And I think it is for younger generations to carry it forward. So, summing up, Professor Savyasaachi, all the 3 points are well appreciated by me, well taken by me, and I endorse the spirit in which it is said and the content, and I try to respond in some possible ways. So far, Professor Ananta Kumar Giri is concerned, I literally didn't follow anything because he was not audible to me. 1 or 2 points will I say picked up. But if Randhir ji could summarize what he wanted to say for me to respond, I would be very happy to respond, Professor Anand, to this point. If you could do it, please do it. I'm sorry, his voice was not audible. There were not only interruptions, voice was feeble, and I could not make anything out of it. Even though I'm sure he made very important points. As one or two words here and there I could listen, I said
Yes.
I could feel that he made very important points. But I'm so sorry,
Okay.
since I didn't, so I'm not able to do any justice to his comments,
Okay.
unless the moderator, Mr. Gautam, summarizes it for me to enable me to respond.
Yes.
Mr. Gautam, over to you, Mr. Gautam.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Actually, he was not audible, but he was sharing a concern about the spirit of dissent. You know, how we can understand dissent in a very broad sense, for that matter. And I have also got some questions in the chat box where it is on Facebook. A question, one respondent, Dr. Prahlad Singh, he is asking, what was the moral basis of Prakash Narayan leadership in Bihar movement? And another question related to his, again, the same question as being asked by Professor Sachi about students' participation. What was the source? What are the reasons behind the student participation, for that matter? So, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So far, Professor Anand Giri's comment on dissent is concerned, I tried to use it in a little broader sense, and he is still probably sought to broaden it further. I think dissent has to be seen in a broader context, rightly. Dissent is just not, as I already said, opposing someone, some individual, for temporary gains, some things, opposing for opposition's sake, opposing an individual. The real dissent is, in a social context, dissent against the system, dissent against institutions, dissent against values, those institutions which shape society, and those values which shape society and human beings. So this dissent has to be seen in a much, much broader sense. I think Gandhi, when he dissented against colonial rule, he dissented in its wider sense and broader context only. He dissented not against a political system, foreign rule, he dissented an economic system, a colonial system imposed on India, and he dissented a kind of culture and a philosophy of social and individual life. He tried to create a utopia which gives a better economic system, a better social system. He used to Harjan, etc., you know that. A better economic, political, social, economic, and moral system to replace that British colonial system. So listen, even JP, who was a follower in many ways, more than one way, was also probably talking in the same spirit. So far, this promote, whatever I could understand, promote moral leadership. I think the kind of moral leadership which JP talked of, if I understood the question rightly then, has literally collapsed in Bihar. His disciples, namely the 3 great disciples who have had powerful say in running the government and society in Bihar after JP movement, these are 3. Lalu Yadavji, who is still living, I wish him good life, long life. unhealthy life, is not keeping well these days. Nitish Kumar and Ramvilas Paswanji no more. These are significant leaders. Now, what kind of a moral message these leaders have said and moral leadership they have established? If anything, this is contrary to the values of Prakash Narayan. Did Lalu Yadav ji practice democracy, even in a limited sense of formal democracy? While he was beneficiary of democratic awakening, democratization, and he did contribute. I shouldn't be unfair to him. In terms of social justice and communal harmony, he has contributed, and I have always accepted. But in terms of political democracy, what has ended? He usurped the political power and social power generated through a process of social evolution. It started in the freedom movement, down through the present movement under Swami Sajanand Saraswati, left and socialist movement led by Prakash Narayan, Ram Manohar Lohia, Karpuri Thakur, to which Laluji also contributed. But what did he say? He said he is the man who is the real person. He said JP would not have been JP if he was not there. So he is the man who should be worshipped. Now, this is this kind of a moral. He denied illegals. And how he did it? First himself, then his wife, then his children. You see the dynasty. All power usurped by family and used in not only most undemocratic manner, feudal manner. You may contest this view, but I'm very clear about this view. This is one leader. Second, Nitish Kumar. I am on record saying for the last 10-15 years, Manya Nitish Kumar, who has many credits to him for certain social economic development, is the man who runs an authoritarian system. He acts like a secretary. In de facto sense, there is no democracy, let alone a democracy of Gandhi's imagination and JP's imagination. One man rule, Nitish rules through a coterie of select bureaucrats who never change and acts like a CEO in the de facto sense. So I have been saying on record through international and national media that Bihar is ruled not by a government which is constitutionally mandated, a council of ministers, but council of secretaries, select secretaries led by a super secretary acting like a CEO called Chief Minister of Bihar. This is very harsh comments I'm making. Ramvilas, what he has said. A Dalit icon. What is it? Yes, all that he settled for administration at the center for himself and his brothers, all political posts. So far as moral message is concerned, if I could understand the question, Prahladji, then this is completely that nowhere suggests that Prakash contributions have not to be remembered. It's like a French Revolution kind of a thing. It's like a Russian Revolution kind of thing. It's an awakening. It's a call post which will guide present and future generations for further action, political, social, cultural action, which help in creating society. Second question is student, Savyasaachi also mentioned. Student has the potential. Student has advantage of age, dynamism, idealism, and this has been happening through history. So JP understood the potential of students and he mobilized that student power. The question is that if the student power is mobilized without preparing it for on ideological lines. You end up with change of government, but not change of system, as it has happened in Bihar. Gandhiji did not only try to dislodge the British regime, he also prepared a leadership, chain of leadership, who had trained in ashrams, Sabarmati and later Wardha, who gave us leadership and governance in the post-independence period and so on. He created a human force. I don't want to use human resource. The kind of thing which Plato was talking. He used to say about his previous ruler, what have you done? Few dockyards, shipyards, what will it do? Create human beings. Develop human beings. Only they can ensure a better society. Human beings. Develop human beings. Now, Gandhi tried to did it in some way. JP also tried to do, but JP had hardly any time. His political end was very close. He had a close call for him. So he had hardly any time to train. And hardly, I don't know, I don't doubt his intention because he came from a Gandhian background. And the net result is, he was able to change the government, replace the government, and in 3 years' time, the government of Morarji Desai was overturned. What happened? And in Bihar-like situation, you have governments for last 3 decades. What is the ended? Yes, elitist society, developmental works, which largely benefit upper section, even education. Yes, there is quantitative growth in the schools, but literally there is no quality in these schools. Universities are destroyed. No freedom and gradual extinction of university system and dissent. Anybody, you don't have teachers who can dissent. Those teachers who can have different views. Even a person like you have to go to Rajasthan to seek employment. After 15 years, some employment of some kind. Teachers don't get even minimum wages in some cases. And this is the kind of society his disciples have created. Who are the real sufferers? Those very deprived sections, backward, extremely backward, even minorities, whose name for the last 3 decades these rulers are ruling, and these are all in the name of JP. Now, that doesn't mean that once you are a revolutionary, you do a revolutionary role, you are a permanent revolution. There is a need for permanent revolution, permanent churning. JP should be a guiding force, which is not for one time. This is the spirit. Gandhi should be taken as a spirit. JP should be taken as, which is evolving a spirit. And this message is important. And for this reason, I pay my tributes to JP on his birthday in my humble way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. It was really very significant and important session. And as Prakash Narayan also wrote in one of his article on, this December 1, 1974, that this struggle, student struggle is in Bihar is not just a flash in a pan of history, but a continuing process of revolutionary change. In that spirit, we can understand his legacy. And thank you so much, sir, for giving a very inspiring talk. And I'm so privileged to listen you after 10 years. And I can find the same spirit of Patna College.
We are all with you.
So in future, we are also trying to construct some libraries and make those libraries as a public sphere so far as the transformation of society is concerned. Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to invite Dr. Devendra Kumar Tiwari, sir, to kindly share his thought or give a vote of thanks. So Professor Tiwari, please give a vote of
Thank
thanks
you.
because we are also running out of time.
No, but allow me to speak a couple of lines.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, sir, for asking me to propose a vote of thanks. I am so much inspired by the talk of Professor Nawal Kishor sir. And really, actually, I am a student of literature. I have never read the philosophy and thoughts of Prakash Narayan, but the way sir presented the beliefs, practices, and ideology of Prakash Narayan, it filled my heart with a kind of enthusiasm that definitely, if the thoughts of Prakash Narayan will be incorporated, definitely will see a change. I would like to correlate the thoughts of Sir, as Sir was mentioning time and again, my Machiavellian practice by the progeny or by the leaders of coming generation, particularly Lalu, Mulayam, Paswan, and maybe other ruling parties. They are somewhere on the path of Machiavelli, who was an Italian philosopher, thinker, writer, who doesn't hesitate to get his work done by hook or crook. Means he was a kind of believer that everything is fair in love and war, like as quoted by William Shakespeare. So to get his work done, he used to opt any means, be it right or wrong. So definitely in nowadays scenario also, particularly be it regional political parties or national political parties, particularly at the time of election, they do not hesitate to adopt any means by which they will come out with the majority. A few other things I would like to highlight from literature, particularly there is a text by William Shakespeare, Macbeth. Macbeth is regarded as Machiavellian hero because he also followed the same path as was propounded by Machiavelli, means to become the king of his country. He didn't hesitate to kill his own king, his best friend, and a series of murders he commits. And finally, his end was not happy. So definitely, there is a poetic justice everywhere, even nowadays also. Definitely at this, as from this platform, I definitely say he, Laluji has enjoyed a lot of freedom and exercised a lot of power, but the world will see his end. What happened with this Paswanji or maybe Mulayam Singh Yadav? They came in power by following the path of JP, but they ended with nepotism. Their end is just that they have created a legacy, they have created an empire, and their family member will be ruling on the particular region or particular society. This was not the dream seen by Prakash Narayan. So at this juncture, I remember one line by one of Nobel laureate of British literature, William Butler Yeats, whose one of his famous poem entitled Second Coming. He says that everything in this world which is established for a good cause turns into evil, and that is a part of life. That is kind of circle of life. Everything, every good thing change into bad, and it comes to the sink. It comes to the origin, and again it keeps rotating. So that line I would like to recite by quoting the example of falcon and falconer. Falcon is known as eagle, means a bird which catches prey for hunter. So he says now that nowadays time has come that nobody is following the moral paths, and for that purpose he says third means falcon, when it is in the sky, once out of the control of its master, he turns round and round in the sky and doesn't listen the command of his master. So for that he says turning and turning in the widening gyre, falcon can't hear the falconer. So this has been a kind of true similarity with this line with the present political parties, who started with a good cause, ended with selfishness and nepotism. So thank you very much, sir. This has been my observation.
Please
Randhir.
give a vote of thanks.
Thank
give
you.
a
Thank
vote
you.
of
Okay.
Please.
So thank you, sir, for asking me to propose a vote of thanks. It's my honor and privilege to propose
Thank
the
you.
vote of thanks on behalf of School of Humanities, Raffles University, Neemrana. Particularly, I would like to express my deep felt gratitude, and I bow my head in gratitude to Professor Nawal Kishor Chaudhary, sir, for being the distinguished speaker and exploring all the aspects of philosophy, biography, and all the major practices and beliefs of Prakash Narayan, and unfolding all hidden facts of JP as well as his legacy. So we are very grateful to you, sir, and I kindly accept our thanks. Next, I would like to express my thanks to Professor Savyasaachi, sir, for being a very prompt commenter, prompt discussant, and highlighting very crucial issues and sharing his opinion of JP movement as a student. So really, it was like of an extra flavor in the talk of Professor Nawal Kishor, sir. So, sir, Professor Savyasaachi, sir, kindly accept our thanks. I would like to express my deep felt gratitude to Professor Giri, sir, for sharing his poem as well as sharing his point of view, although because of weak signal, his voice was interrupted, but overall it was fine and sir presented well. I would like to express my thanks to all distinguished participants, audience, viewers, listeners from all over India for listening so patiently and making this event a grand success, because no speech or no talk can be successful without audience and active audience. So I'm thankful to the active audience. Thanks a lot to everybody. Last but not the least, I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Randhir Gautam for planning, executing, and being the convener of this session. Thank you very much, sir. Have a nice day.
पंख लगाती है, कल्पना ज्वार से उद्वेलित मानस तट पर थर्राती है। वह सुनो भविष्य पुकार रहा, वह दलित देश का त्राता है। स्वप्नों का दृष्टा जयप्रकाश भारत का भाग्य विधाता है। स्वप्नों का दृष्टा जयप्रकाश भारत का भाग्य विधाता है।